All right, now that the water's dried, I see that my paper's still a little bent, so I'm going to spend a second to reshape it. All right, so it lays a little bit flatter before I get going. And then I've mixed out 2 greens because we're going to start with this stuff back up in here a little bit. I mixed out a green, orange, and brown, and a green, blue, and brown. So I have one that's lighter and one that's a little bit darker. Adding the orange gets a little bit nice color in there so that it changes and gets a little bit darker than our kind of astroturf green that they give us. And then I think instead of using my big brush, I'm going to switch to my medium-sized brush. I've already mixed up these 2 colors. They're ready to go. So I'm just going to stir them up a little bit. Remember which one's which. Oh, good. I'm going to start with the lighter one. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to start filling it in. It's almost just, putting a thick coat on with this green, and I kind of dab my brush so that I don't get a straight line. I get a kind of bumpy line, which is really good for shrubbery. We don't want to straight line. We want it to be very leaf-like and growing, kind of abstract. Now, if some gets a little bit darker in places than others, that's fine. I want to put it on so it's kind of thick. I don't want a thin layer. You can see I'm putting it on here so that it has a nice thick coat of paint, because when it's lighter, and if you look at the picture, they've got some pretty dark dark shrubs, and I'm going to pull it all the way down to the edge here over the top of some of my sand. Remember, I had you put sand and dirt down there before. Kind of trying to get rid of all the little white holes as I go along, up along in the sky, and then also along in the sand, and putting a nice, it's not thick enough over here. I'm just going to put a little teensy bit more in there. So if it's still wet and you notice that it's, not thick enough in some space, you can just kind of drop another one, drop in there. I think I'm going to get this so it curves a little bit so it looks like you can walk along there, but the beach is kind of coming up to it. Yeah, now I'm going to do the rest of this little tree here. Made it too straight, so I'll make a couple little bumps there. Got a little bit of a puddle there, but that's not such a big thing because it can change as it dries. Some will be darker, some will be lighter. I'll go all the way over to the edge over here, to the edge of our water. I still want this to come down a teensy bit more, I think. There, I'm starting to feel better about it now. You don't want this totally straight though, so you see I got it really straight right now. You want to also make it a little bit crooked so it seems more organic. Right, because trees have organic forms that are not square or absolute circles, or they're odd shapes. And now I'm going to take it out towards the edge of the point, and I just kind of run some of it over the edge of the sky so it kind of works nice. And there we go. I'm going to let that dry. Gotta let it dry before we do anything else to it. And if I were to try and touch up water or something, it would all smear. So you gotta give it 5 or 10 minutes to just kind of get nice and dry. All right, good time to work on another assignment from another class, or, take a break. So now we're gonna work on finishing up a little bit of the water. I just want to make sure that I have a drop of each. Nice water in each one of the little holders so that when I need color, I can have it. Then I've refreshed my blues, right? On this one, I'm going to use the blue-green, maybe a little bit of the blue-violet, and some more blue water. Let's see how it goes, right? So here we go. We're going to start off with my blue-green, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to darken the back. So now this time I'm going to do maybe half across. I'm going to straighten up If my horizon line got a little bit crooked, now's the time to straighten it. Okay, I've got it going. I'm going to rinse my brush out. I'm using my big brush. I'm going to dry it off. And I'm going to use my brush left to right to kind of smear it in. I'm darkening the back of the horizon line so it'll look like the ocean goes back into the distance more. Maybe you can see it a little bit now that we finished. A little bit more beauty to the piece, right? I'm going to do that again. I've got the blue-green. It's kind of thick. It's not thinned out very much. It's kind of a thick paint. If you let your palette dry out a little bit and then when you go to mix it up again, you just mix a little less water. Remember, you can save your colors. If you stop for one day, you can just save the palette paint. So now I'm going to do the same thing. Dry it off. Rinse it out, dry it off using just the water on the brush to kind of pull it forward. You can see I'm going left to right with my brush. Dry it off again. Get rid of this little chunk here maybe. Right, I want it just a little bit darker on the far side over here. Alright, pulling it out. Now I'm going to take a little bit of the bluish water and I'm going to start putting in some details here. There's a couple spots where it looks like the water pulls out from the shore and it gets a little darker, so I'm just going to put that on. You see I've drawn in a little spot where it's doing that. And I just kind of get it good. You don't want it upward, you want it left to right. So you see, now I've put on a little spot. Now I'm going to come in here with a dry brush. I'm going to soften it so it goes like a shadow. Remember we learned on shadows that it goes from darker to light? Trying to go left to right with it. And I don't want too harsh of an edge on the sides. It could be a little bit here and there, but I want to keep it kind of bright, so I'm kind of blended. So I'm kind of using a dry brush to. I'm going to do another one over here, so it'll lay back into the distance a little bit. I'll take the blue plus water and I'll go left to right with my brush, not up and down, or that'll make the whole water seem like it's not flat. If you go this way, it's bad. Going that way gets the idea of some little bit of ocean current going on there. You can see I'm doing that a little bit more. And you do this for a couple spots. I think I'll put another one in over here. Try and get the idea that there's a ocean current that's kind of pulling back into the water. And using a dry brush to like soften the edges of it. Maybe a little bit more detail over in this part. I'll put a few little. See, I'm able to put on like a little wave. And now I can come in with a dry brush and just kind of soften places that I don't want. Just around the edges. I don't go into it. I just go around the edges of it so it can smear on the edge a little bit. I'm going to put one over here. It's a little light over here anyway. I'll put a little bit of one. It was a little damp already, so that kind of just blended right in. I can soften the edge on the top and the bottom a little bit along the edge here. And you can see that's drying up a little bit darker in the back. I'm going to go one more time across the back eventually to make it look even nicer. This seems a little bit unfinished here, so I think I'll take even just a little bit of the blue-green and do the same sort of thing I did before. Left to right with my brush. Dry it out. Blend it in a little bit. Not everywhere, just so it gets the idea that there's some water moving over there. A little teensy bit in here. Alright. I'm not liking this darkness here. If you get something like that and you don't like it, you can wait till it's partially dry like I'm doing and come in and pull up a little spot or add a teensy bit more so it's just a little bit softer. Adding a little texture to it that way with the dry brush. Just a teensy bit of water and a little bit of paint gives the opportunity to create the idea there might be little spots where the ocean's lifting up in a couple places or changing direction, catching the light differently. Okay, we're going to use the darker green, the green with the green, the brown, and the blue in it. Remember, smaller amounts of those, right? So it makes a darker green to put a layer on top of this so we have some layering. Here you can see what I'm talking about on this one. You see how there's some of the other green showing through underneath it. We're going to do that to ours with our medium-sized brush. If you don't have a lot of the green, you want to mix up a good amount. You see how I've got like a teaspoonful here of it so that you'll have plenty to put on. You're going to start putting it on at the bottom, and it can be sort of straight down here at the bottom because there's not maybe I'll curve it a little bit, but it's going to be pretty full down there. There's not too much light getting into the back of the trees there. So we go up to the top though, we're going to need more and more of it showing through, so you can see I'm just kind of dabbing it on here, leaving some of it to show through and closing it up so it kind of touches down at the bottom. And I keep loading up my brush so I leave a nice thick coat of paint there, not a thin one. Then it can dry over the top and get darker. And as I go across, I keep doing this, adding a little bit more dark, letting the other green show through underneath so I don't cover it all up. And here we go. Moving right along. If I notice like over here it got a little thin, I'll do what I call dropping paint. You just load your brush up with some paint. You drop a little bit more into wet areas. See how it's thinning right there? I could just come in and drop a little drop of it and it'll get nice and thick again. That way it'll dry dark. If you let it stay thin, it won't dry as dark. And you want at least 2 layers of shrubs with some of the other lighter green showing through, especially on the top where the light's hitting it from the sky. So now I've got that taken care of. I'll let it dry. So we want to wait until our trees are completely dry. Some of them have puddles in them. You can tell that by touching it, and it doesn't feel cold or wet. We'll make sure that's all dry, especially right up next to the water, because that's our last part to do. As you can see, I put a little bit more of the little blue here and there to make the water look like it's flowing back with a dry brush. And now I'm going to just concrete this back just a teensy bit more by using just a teensy bit of the blue violet, right? And I'm going to take my brush and on half of the water, I'm going to go right along the back of the horizon line so I have a nice kind of dark little line back there of blue. Sometimes I'll even drop a little bit down there. Now rinse my brush out, and I'm going to grade it so it goes to light. Rinse my brush out again, a little bit farther away, and you can see how it's darkening up just the back. And I do that all the way across. Nice and dark in the back, nice and straight. You don't want to get any bumps if you can help it. A nice dark line. And then rinse your brush out, dry it off, and use the damp from the brush, left to right, to finish off your water. So it's nice and dark in the distance. I am just using water that's been dried off on the paper towel to get a nice landscape. Look how good we did. Hopefully you've gotten a nice, something that looks maybe not as beautiful as mine because I've been painting a long time, but maybe you've gotten something that does look like a landscape and has maybe some nice clouds or some good trees, or it's your first big watercolor. Hopefully it came out nice for you. Don't forget to take a good picture and submit it to me. Thank you very much.